Support comes from
Entergy provides much more than power. We support science and engineering at local schools to build a brighter path to better jobs and help prepare the next generation. Because together, we power life. Entergy.
additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
"5 months of a task force and you send conflicting proposals."
Questioning the message of lawmakers.
I found that there was so little out there in the world that told me anything about this culture that I was seeing.
Redefining the cowboy image. Hi, everyone. I'm Andre Morrow. Much more on those stories in a moment on SWI, the state we're in. But first, we are heading into the weekend before Mardi Gras 2018. Parades are rolling all across the state as revelers check out what's called the biggest free party on earth. Extra attention this year in New Orleans with its tricentennial. Typically up to 1.4 million visitors pour into the Big Easy for Fat Tuesday fun. There is some good news for people still struggling to recover from the 2016 floods. Governor Edwards says FEMA will reduce rent for those still living in manufactured housing to $50 a month beginning in March. The price break will run through the middle of May, but the governor says he'll request another extension. FEMA says fair market rental value would be almost $1,000 a month for this temporary housing. When the next natural disaster does strike here, we may have little ability to begin the recovery process. The Trump administration wants states to come up with more of the initial money for recovery. With our seemingly never-ending budget problems, things don't bode well for us. It's causing state emergency management leaders to look at a number of things, including ways to coordinate even more volunteer efforts. They're called the perfect invasive species, and State Wildlife and Fisheries says they're about to explode in waterways from Terrebonne-Lafourche to Calcasieu Parish this year. The worry is the snails, which grow to the size of your fist, will float into pump systems that irrigate rice and crawfish crops, potentially wiping out crops. They've been reported in 27 parishes and in crawfish ponds. First seen after Hurricane Katrina, Wildlife and Fisheries says don't handle them because they can carry a parasite that can be deadly. Flu shots at no cost are being offered across the state at parish health units until Lundi Gras, Monday, February 12th. The vaccine is available to anyone who hasn't had one yet this flu season. Office of Public Health continues to remind people the flu shot is still the most effective way to prevent the flu. And if you're in the first stages of coming down with the flu, don't go to work and keep yourself away from others as much as possible.
We are right now is much higher than any of the peaks in the past previous flu seasons. So this has been the most intense, most severe since H1N1. We had a fairly severe season 3 or 4 years ago, but even right now in early February, the number of people that are ill in Louisiana really is comparable to the highest levels of flu illness in the past previous years.
Community health centers that provide critical health care to 385,000 of the state's poorest people sounded alarm bells and avoided deep cuts this week. Funding was set to expire March 31st, but lawmakers included the clinics in a long-term funding deal that was passed Friday morning. Louisiana relies on more than 250 health centers to treat low-income people for day-to-day needs. We have gathered a round table of experts on state politics to help us understand what our lawmakers are considering for a special session. Will the extra incentive sales tax be renewed? Will lawmakers make exemptions permanent? And what about House Speaker Taylor Barra's spending reform plans?
Joining us are Melinda DeLotte with the Associated Press, Elizabeth Crisp with the Advocates Capitol News Bureau, and Kevin Fry with WAFB. Well, folks, we have coming up a fiscal cliff in July with the expiring 5th cent of sales tax. What are we likely to see unfold in the coming weeks?
Well, I think right now what you're seeing is a lot of disagreement over how to address it. The governor thinks that most of the $1 billion that is expiring should be replaced with new or different taxes, and House Republicans in particular, but Republicans in both chambers seem to be questioning if all of that revenue needs to be replaced, and then if so, how much of it, and what amount of cuts should they consider to do to state spending.
Melinda, you've been covering the Capitol for about 18 years, you've said.
Time.
Kevin Fry, you a little over 2 years, and Elizabeth, I think you mentioned 4 years, is that right? But you said it feels like 8 or 10. It probably feels a lot longer because there have been special sessions that have happened. I want to ask just the panel, what is the relationship between a Democratic governor and a Republican state right now? What is that relationship, Kevin?
Well, in general, it's just not going very well at the moment, and I think that's pretty apparent for anyone who's watching at home, seeing these sorts of things play out. There's a current disagreement, as Melinda was hitting on, about exactly how to address this, but this is the, third year go-around of these special sessions. If, provided they call one, this would be the the 5th special session, rather, in just as many years. And they seem to continue to butt heads over the same thing, which is spending versus not spending, how many cuts, and where to put them. And the governor seemingly wants to try to prevent as many cuts as possible, although it's questionable exactly how much has been cut over the past few years.
And then I think that there's this question of, the public, not everyone is so keyed into what is going on all the time, but they keep hearing the same, we have to have a special session, we have a fiscal cliff, it's been, since the governor took office, it's been the same discussion. He came in with a fiscal cliff and we're gonna shore it up.
And we're still there.
And this was supposed to be a temporary thing until they were supposed to fix everything last year, and now we're right back where we were.
But are we right back where we were? I guess we are, but maybe there are new issues.
It's sort of like a hamster wheel.
It's a self-imposed problem.
Right. I mean, part of the issue is because the two sides don't tend to agree philosophically on how to approach the budget and state spending. They keep doing these temporary kind of patchwork fixes because they haven't reached a long-term deal on what they think the state's government spending should look like.
And there's the question that if it was a Republican governor, would they be able to do that? Would Republicans be willing to move somewhere because they would be able to get the cover from a Republican governor as opposed to a Democrat? The philosophy issue would still be there.
Right. What some Democrats suggest, and including some more moderate Republicans who actually get along fairly well with the governor, suggests is that there perhaps are some Republican legislators who don't support the governor's ideas or don't work well with the governor because they don't want him to succeed and get a second term. Now, I think some Republicans would disagree with that and say they just fundamentally don't agree with his positions on things.
And Kelly is LPB's expert on politics and the Capitol, because you have been there hours and hours and years on end. What is standing out to you? What are the big points that you want to get across here?
So the sales tax seems to be the most likely piece that's in play, either a full part of that cent or a fraction of the part. I'd like to talk about some of the dynamics, because the sales tax is a regressive tax, meaning it affects people at the bottom of the income structure the most. Are we seeing Democrats kind of against raising the sales tax itself?
I think it is kind of a shifting dynamic. The governor has said from the get-go he doesn't support extending the sales tax hike. It was meant to be a bridge. Even if you do a partial, not the full penny, but a half penny or whatever, he is still continuing to call that a temporary measure. He would only support it if it's a bridge. And that is what he has told the Democrats in the legislature, and that's what they told their constituents. They said, I understand that this is going to affect you, this is going to affect your pocketbook, What I've been hearing from a lot of Republicans, though, is that they don't really hear a lot about it from their constituents, and also they don't necessarily buy into people are hurting because it doesn't apply to groceries, it doesn't apply to medicine, and so they feel like they have an argument to, well, the sales tax isn't really that bad.
I think you see that as the fundamental argument of the session in some ways is the governor has said, I am not interested in renewal of this 1 penny sales tax. The Democratic legislators have said, we're not interested in renewal of this. But that seems to be one of the only ideas that when you talk to Republican legislators who are willing to consider taxes at all, they are talking about some variation of a sales tax renewal, whether that's the full penny, whether that's half a penny. There are scenarios about a quarter of a penny, and then there are different scenarios about maybe we could pass a half penny of the sales tax and dedicate a quarter of it to roads and bridges or to the TOPS program. But those are a lot of the scenarios you hear floated in the House among Republicans, and Republicans are the majority in the chamber. They have the leadership, so you need Republicans on board with an idea for it to pass. But then if you can't get Democrats on board with it, you don't have enough for a 2/3 vote to pass the legislation. So it seems as though that is going to be the fundamental question is, do we renew the sales tax, and then if so, how, and with what votes?
And you look at the cuts, nobody wants to cut TOPS, nobody wants to cut health care, and then infrastructure is just seemingly tossed aside, but that is one of our biggest problems and biggest growth problems in the state. So what do you do about that? Because reality says if you're not going to increase money and revenue somewhere, you got to make some cuts.
Yeah, let's talk about the spending side of things. The Speaker would like to implement spending reforms. Liz, do you want to explain kind of what he's put on the table?
Yeah, so 2 of the key reform. Well, I think it's important just to start out with none of these actually address the fiscal cliff right now, but they are important. In the Republicans really feel strongly that they want to couple these measures with any sort of revenue. So like you give us this and we'll give you this. It's kind of a we need to get something if we're going to agree to what you want. So 2 of them have to deal with Medicaid. The Trump administration has come in and has been very agreeable to various reforms within Medicaid. So they want to have co-pays and work requirements in the state's Medicaid program. They want a redefining of how much state government can spend each year instead of just relying on the revenue estimating panel as it does now. They want a new cap that is more linked with growth within the state. And then they also are wanting this website to be set up that's going to increase transparency. We do have a transparency website, and the governor's administration is constantly pointing to that we do have LaTrack. They want to make it better. They haven't had the money. But just yesterday at the Lobby Conference, they had somebody from Ohio. Ohio Checkbook has become this model that a lot of people are pointing to. There's a big rallying behind it, a whole coalition of groups, lobbying groups kind of are getting behind it, and there was a demonstration and just everybody in the crowd was kind of wowed by, you can look at these graphs and drill down to an actual check, and so people are finding this flashy and they really want this.
But at the end of the day,
well, sorry,
go ahead.
Jump over you. I think what Republicans say about this, the Speaker has described, it may not address the immediate fiscal cliff that we're facing, but in the grand scheme, they think these are ways to control long-term spending. So they think if you're asking us for taxes now and you want us to fill this gap now, we want to make sure that we restrain the growth in government in the long term so that they have a sense that government is growing too fast, that it's outpacing the growth of the economy. And so they want things that they think will somehow compress state spending in the long term. And so they are saying, we will give you some tax votes, but we will tie those tax bills to these spending control measures so that we get some assurances that perhaps we've stopped growth, uncontrollable growth long term.
Some conservatives want to wait to have a special session because the oil price is going up and we might get more money to state coffers because of a federal tax bill that was passed in last year. Kevin, would you like to explain that dynamic?
Right, so because of the way that the federal tax rewrite works, essentially you could deduct less because your federal taxes would be going down, so you'd be deducting less on your state taxes, so you'd be paying more. And so in theory that will bring more than $200 million, I believe is the figure they're kind of ballparking right now, into the state's coffers that they would be able to work with. However, the push to do it later is being countered by folks like LSU President F. King Alexander, who are saying, look, TOPS kids, college students, parents, they need to know right now what they can expect, or they might decide to go someplace else. So it's kind of a back and forth dynamic over to do it now, do it later, and wait and see.
That sounds like the legislature is just summed up right now. Do it later, wait and see. The great thing is you guys will get to cover it. All of you will be there. All of us will be there. And it'll be either more of the same or maybe something new will happen. We'll wait and see. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In that roundtable, we mentioned the TOPS program. One reason lawmakers are concerned is because as the budget proposal stands now, there's no state money for the TOPS program, leaving it about 20% funded. TOPS costs have soared over the last decade, and a task force met to tackle those costs. Now, they ultimately did not make any definitive recommendations. I talked with an LSU student who is a liaison to the legislature and a state representative, Ted James, who was a member of the task force. Ted, to meet a dozen or more times and then wind up sending all of the recommendations, 9 recommendations to the full legislature and not going through some of the sticking points, your thoughts on that?
We clearly didn't make the tough decisions and respond and report to the legislature in a unified voice.
The process that will let the legislature ultimately decide what's best for the state and its students leaves one LSU student government leader wondering.
My question to the task force would be, well, why was there not an invitation for at least a student body president or someone to come sit on the panel, talk about it? I mean, 5 months of a task force and you send conflicting proposals. It doesn't send a good message to us.
Senator Blade Morris from Jennings headed up the task force.
That the most important thing to do was for us to take these proposals that we've narrowed, Andre, from maybe 100 down to 9. And then of those, probably only 5 are controversial.
One of those that is controversial is one Morris has authored. He's in favor of turning the most common form of TOPS, called TOPS Opportunity, into a $4,000 yearly grant. Its current value is almost $7,500. James would like to see the TOPS awards spread out more evenly.
I have 41 kids in my district that receive TOPS, and I would venture to say that they were either in the middle or closer to the bottom.
The think tank Education Reform Now says 40% of TOPS students are from the top 20% income families in the state. They say that's the opposite of what other states do.
I come from a single-parent household. My mom's a nurse.
Sakathy is from New Orleans, a double major senior with 1 semester left.
Going into LSU, TOPS is just a savior.
Sakathy says he knew with TOPS he'd be able to make ends meet. When he graduates, he plans on med school and would love to stay in-state with the LSU system, but admits there are SEC rivals that, like in football, spend a lot of time in the Bayou State.
Alabama recruits very heavily in Louisiana, so does Ole Miss and University of Mississippi medical system.
What's your biggest fear that's going to happen?
We're not going to do anything. The legislature is great about studying. TOPS is such a sacred cow that legislators are fearful of making any changes.
I think what's lost in translation with this task force and all the stuff that's going on is that these are, human stories. These are students who are trying to do their best that could have, even in the rawest sense, like a good economic input into the state. But if the state can't back them up, then how are they supposed to stay here? When you have Alabama knocking on your door offering to give you scholarships, free housing. These days, I don't know if I'd stay here.
Not what you want to hear if you're trying to keep the state's best and brightest. Again, we will follow this story. This week, two of the nation's leading historically black universities, Southern University and Grambling State, linked up via Skype so together they could watch the screening of Tell Them We Are Rising, the story of historically black colleges and universities. What do people need to know about HBCUs that they may not have any idea about?
Wow, there are so many things that we could point to. People don't realize how HBCUs really created the African American middle class.
It was in 1901 that Booker T. Washington from Tuskegee sent Charles P. Adams at the request of some farmers in the piney woods of North Louisiana to create what became Grambling State University.
More on this gathering of Southern and Grambling a week from tonight on SWI. That's ahead of the airing of Tell Them We Are Rising. That's on LPB and PBS Monday night, February 19th at 8 o'clock. To remake the image of the cowboy that is ingrained in our culture would be some undertaking, but that's one that a Louisiana photographer named Jeremiah Aries is doing. His work is featured right now at the West Baton Rouge Museum in Port Allen. It's an exhibit that's called Creoles du Monde. LPB's Kelly Spires talked with him about it. Sounds interesting.
Thanks, Andre. Ari's photos capture a common pastime found across southwest Louisiana, the trail ride, which has its roots in Creole ranching culture. Trail rides are a celebration of family and fun, all set to the backdrop of Zydeco music, often with live bands. Let's take a look.
I was on my motorcycle on Highway 77, and it's a small two-lane road that sort of follows the bayou. And I was out there on a Sunday afternoon, and coming down the road were probably 50 or 60 people on horseback. I happened to have the camera with me. A gentleman named Henry, who was at the end of the ride and was a flagman, sort of keeping everybody in check, saw me with my camera, and he waved me over, encouraging me to join them. And so I turned around my motorcycle and rode with them, made some photographs. I asked if it would be possible for me to join them on another ride, and they said yes. Initially, I didn't know that it would be something that I would end up pursuing for 4.5 years. And the more time that I spent with them, I realized there was so much here. Family was such a big part of the event that people would bring their wives, their children, and I saw kids learning how to ride horses from a very young age. It's really a celebration. I mean, it's such a fun activity to be a part of. There's music, there's food, there's just such a joyous atmosphere. One of the reasons I was so compelled to make the work is that once I became interested in it, I found that there was so little out there in the world that told me anything about this culture that I was seeing. The origins of the trail rides are really an outgrowth of the equestrian culture that has been a part of southwest Louisiana for centuries. Seeing somebody on a horse, it's kind of the mythic American figure, and usually we associate that with westerns, and they're riding, maybe going against the sunset, and they're white. I mean, that's what people have grown up to think of as the cowboy culture. Here we are in this very unique place in southwest Louisiana. I like to be able to expand that view to encompass a broader segment of the population, and yet at the same time realize that these trail riders are a part of this original equestrian culture, that at least a quarter, if not more, of those original cowboys were people of color. And here's a real continuation of that history being enacted on the streets of Louisiana every week. A big part of it for me is trying to compose within the frame of the camera a manner in which is going to describe as much as possible about the world that I'm witnessing. So just in order to do that technically, I'm often using a wide-angle lens, which enables me to get both close to the action and yet reveal a lot of information on the periphery. For example, this photograph behind me, I'm on a trailer with them. I love that there's, again, this sort of multi-generational representation here of the kids. There's a young girl with a lasso in hand. Riding just behind the trailer on horseback is a gentleman who is embracing a young boy on the saddle, teaching him to ride, and so you see him in the background. And the wide-angle lens that enables me to be close, kind of intimate with the subject, and yet still reveal a lot of external information about the world. With the photographs, I'm looking for moments that might be both intimate and at the same time descriptive of the larger scene that is unfolding. But I'm also trying to capture the landscape in a way that can describe this place. And so many of the photographs are really descriptive of the kind of landscape of Southwest Louisiana. We see sugarcane fields, we see water, we see the bayou. The rides happen on a weekly basis, and so I try to send everybody a digital file of the photographs in the week following the ride. And then the next time I am able to attend a ride, I'll bring 8x10 photographs, and I'll look for the people that I've photographed in the previous years. I think it's really important the people have representation of themselves, and in a way that signifies power and respect. And for me, I hope that the photographs convey that. I feel that they do. And I think that there's a point of recognition when I'm able to share that with the subjects.
Aries is still looking for some of the people he photographed. If you or someone you know took part in his work, email him at the address on your screen. Now, you can see those photos at the exhibit in West Baton Rouge until May 6th, and more of his work in his forthcoming book, Louisiana Trail Riders, scheduled to be released this summer by UL Press.
Very cool, Kelly. I like that. Thank you so much. Aries was recently honored for his work by the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities, as was Louisiana Public Broadcasting. LEH recognized LPB producer Christina Melton with the Humanities Documentary Film Award for her film, Deeply Rooted. It's John Kuykendall's journey to save our seeds and stories. And that's our show for this week. Remember, you can watch LPB on demand on your phone or tablet with our LPB Anywhere app. The download is free from your app store. You can catch LPB news and public affairs shows as well as other Louisiana programs that you've come to enjoy over the years. And please like us on Facebook as well. For everyone at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Morrow. Thanks for watching us. Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Check us out on Facebook and Twitter, and visit lpb.org, where you can view more stories and leave us a comment. This program is available on DVD. Support comes from
Entergy provides much more than power. We support science and engineering at local schools to build a brighter path to better jobs and help prepare the next generation. Because together, we power life. Entergy.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.